best Mass Effect question. The Genophage question is one of the most difficult questions you'll ever come across in any video game, period. And that isn't because the Krogans are sexy blue-skinned aliens on the verge of destruction from the evil, non-sexy races. It isn't because the Turians, the Asari and the Solarians are the antagonists in this complex, nuanced story. It isn't because the Krogan's aggressive nature left the Citadel Council races with no option but to release the Genophage. The Genophage, a biological weapon that reduces the probability of viable pregnancies, which combined with the Krogan's proclivity for violence, results in a population deficit on a massive scale, effectively making the Krogans a dying race. The reason why choosing to wipe out the Krogans is such a difficult question is, they are the victims of necessity. The Krogans have and will always be the innocent in this story. Me, you, and everyone else who made these decisions along with the council are the antagonist. But I'm a utilitarian, so I believe in the sacrifice if it leads to a greater good, which means I believe in uplifting the Krogans despite them being not ready. And if I accept that, then I must believe in the Genophage, a biological weapon that reduces. And I do. So I accept their eventual demise, and that makes me an asshole. But an asshole with a reason. Let me explain. Rachni. With the Rachni spreading all over the galaxy and causing havoc, the Citadel races, which consisted of the Solarians and Asaris, had to take a drastic step in putting this war to a close. Millions of lives had been lost at this point, and all attempts to negotiate for peace had been faced with more violence by the Rachni. If the war continued, it wasn't a stretch to say the Rachni would eventually be the dominant race in the galaxy. You see, apart from their massive numbers which aided them greatly, they were also extremely intelligent. After all, they were able to reverse engineer the FTL drives they captured, which then resulted in them creating their own ships, which then gave them access to the galaxy, which led to them trying to claim the galaxy, which then resulted in the Citadel races pushing back. And so the Rachni Wars began. But the point here really isn't the war itself. The Citadel races had been no stranger to wars back on their homeland. It was almost expected some kind of conflict would happen with another race, now or in the near future. The problem here was the reason and the trajectory of this war. What's the reason for the war? That's the problem. There was no reason. As far as the council were concerned, this wasn't necessarily about land, as most of the galaxy hadn't been colonized, so there was enough to go around. This couldn't be about resources, as this goes hand in hand with land, and the Rachni had made no statements on this. And this surely couldn't be a case of vendetta, as no crime against the Rachni had been committed. If anything, the council sought to bring them in order to establish some type of mutual beneficial relationship. But alas, the Rachni weren't interested. In fact, they weren't interested in anything at all. As far as the council were concerned, this was a mindless war, which made the Rachni even more dangerous, a mindless enemy solely bent on your annihilation. And if that frame of thinking instilled fear in the council, then the trajectory of this war amplified that. The war's trajectory. You see, with each planet conquered by the Rachni, they claimed additional resources. Those resources birthed new Rachni. Those new Rachni, along with those new resources, birthed new ships and weapons. And with more Rachni ships and weapons at their disposal, the Rachni gained more wins. More wins led to more council defeats, and more defeats for the council led to more losses on the land and resource front. And so the vicious cycle of the Rachni expanding continued. For the council, it was pretty clear there was an event horizon approaching, a point of no return where the Rachni army would be too vast to counter. So for the sake of the galaxy and the undiscovered races such as the Yarg, the Vulture, Horines, Drell, Elcro, Volus, Militaristic, and of course, the human race, you. The Rachni had to be stopped, and there was only one race that had the biological features to do this. Meet the Krogans. The Krogans hail from Tuchanka, a world known for its harsh environment, scarce resources, and overabundance of vicious predators. So by default, natural selection is likely to have played a pivotal role in the success story of any creature or race that hailed from this planet. And the Krogans were not just the best success story that hailed from Tuchanka, but the whole galaxy. Let's talk physique.
Let's talk physique.
Standing at over 7 feet tall, a typical Krogan could weigh between 150 to 200 kilograms, with some capping off at around 362 kg. That in itself is impressive, but what really catches the eye is the internal workings of these formidable creatures. Let's talk biology. Krogans have not one but 4 lungs, 2 hearts and 4 testicles, a large shoulder hump to store fluids and nutrients which allows them to survive for extended periods of time without food or water.
Keep going.
Krogans also have thick skins which make them virtually impervious to cuts, bruises and scrapes, a defense mechanism that also makes them resistant to environmental hazards, toxins, radiation and extreme heat and cold. A wide set of eyes giving them 240-degree vision, a secondary nervous system made entirely of fluid which means paralyzation is all but impossible. And it doesn't stop there. Their sheer physical hardiness means an individual can expect to live for centuries or in some cases over 1,000 years. And aside from the physical capabilities, Krogans have a special ability dubbed Blood Rage, which puts them in a vicious stance, making them extremely difficult to kill or incapacitate. In this mind frame, Krogans become totally unresponsive to pain and will fight to the death regardless of any injury level, which is perfectly fine if your goal is to war. You see, the Krogans are not just the best chance to take out the ever-growing Rachni. They're the galaxy's best weapon, a weapon with a conscience. But there's a problem, because as great as the Krogans are, Tuchanka is more. The Krogans aren't surviving Tuchanka because of their biology and adaptability. They're surviving Tuchanka because of their ability to reproduce and mature at an alarming rate. To give you an example, a female Krogan can produce up to 1,000 fertilized eggs over the course of 1 year. Do you understand? Tuchanka keeps the Krogans in check, and if that check were to be removed, you would have an endless supply of the galaxy's best chance and weapon. A weapon with a conscience. But as far as the Citadel Council was concerned, the former was more important than the later. So the council did what anyone would have done in the face of the coming Rachni takeover. They liberated the primitive Krogans by uplifting them. This involved giving them advanced technology, medicine, and relocating them to a different planet. A planet not cursed with the lethal levels of radiation, apex predators, and deadly toxins. A planet that would allow every female Krogan to produce over 1,000 fertilized eggs on a yearly basis. Planets that would enable every newborn Krogan to be war-ready due to their ability to mature at a much faster rate. And the plan worked, because within 2 generations, the rapidly breeding Krogans had the numbers to not only drive back the advancing Rachni, but the ability to endure the harsh conditions of the Rachni worlds, which allowed them to go to places no Solarians and Asari could go. And eventually, they made it all the way to the Rachni homeworld, where they eradicated the Queen along with their entire race. All hail the Krogans, the guardians of the galaxy. But of course, all good things must come to an end. You see, for a short period of time, the Krogans were highly regarded for their participation in this war, and for their efforts they were given the Rachni worlds and other planets to colonize in Citadel space. A monument was even commissioned to honor the fallen soldiers that fell during combat. However, as the years went by, the Krogans continued to breed, and without the conditions of Tuchanka to keep their numbers in check, their population swelled to unprecedented numbers. Overcrowding and fighting soon became a common theme, and to offset or mitigate this, the Krogans forcefully claimed other planets. At first, the council chose to appease the Krogans, letting them claim territory with very little pushback. Maybe this was due to them empathizing with the Krogan situation. Maybe it was due to them having a sense of responsibility as they had uplifted them prematurely. Maybe it was because the planet's claims so far were of no importance to the council. Maybe it was due to fear. Maybe it was all the above. Regardless, when the Krogans began settling on the Asari colony of Lusua, Council's attitude changed dramatically. The Council ordered them to vacate the colony immediately or risk conflict, which the Krogans probably thought was cute. They rejected and laughed it off, and Overlord Kredak, in his own words, dared the Council to take their worlds back. And so the Krogan rebellions began. You could argue the Citadel races are facing a similar threat in relation to the Rachni and the Krogans, an ever-growing army that is difficult to push back, but you'd be wrong in your assessment. 2 points.
Point 1.
The Rachni problem was a threat to the galaxy, but not an immediate one. The many planets and species out there, the Rachni's expansion wouldn't have been as dire. There's nothing to suggest that the intelligent Rachni would have devoured worlds of fauna, life, and resources. It's more than likely they would have only taken what was actually needed and attacked animals or races that they deemed hostile. Krogans, on the other hand, are completely different. The reason why they're in this situation is due to their lack of understanding of population control and resource management. And please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying the Rachni weren't bad in this regard. I'm saying in comparison to the Krogans, the Rachni were probably tame. As far as the Krogans were concerned, why engage in population control when you can just move on to the next? Point number 2. We know that Rachni's strength doesn't necessarily come in their durability but their numbers, so there's at least some clear weakness. The Krogans, however, have none. And at this point, one could make an argument that there are actually more Krogans than there ever was Rachni. And the key difference that sets them apart from the Rachni is not just their numbers or better biology, but their technology. As the Krogans were allies of the Council, it makes sense that the Krogans had a pretty good understanding of the Asaris and Solarians' strengths and weaknesses. It also makes sense that they share technology with each other. So in order to beat the Krogans, a new race would be needed. A race with a militaristic approach. A race which core is based on military. A race with militaristic prowess. Yeah. The tact to outmaneuver the Krogans. Who? Meet the Turians. The introduction of the Turians. In the midst of the Krogan rebellions, the Citadel Council made contact with the militaristic-like group of aliens specialized in combat called the Turians. Standing at over 6 feet tall, the Turians resemble— All this isn't important. What is important is the Turians brought their expertise and war machines to bear on the Krogans, and they succeeded. They were able to rout the Krogans, taking back planet after planet and eventually cornering them on their homeworld, Tuchanka, which eventually led to the Krogans surrendering under the Council's new territory. I'm fucking with you. The trajectory of this war never changed. The Krogans were always on the way to victory. The Turians' attack, while initially successful, only managed to claim a few skirmishes here and there. But the Krogans' retaliation was draconian. But the Krogans' retaliation was brutal. They wiped out entire Turian colonies, rendering worlds inhabitable after glassing them with asteroids. The trajectory of this war never changed. The Krogans were always on the way to victory. Even if current-day Mass Effect humans were added to this battle, the Krogans would still come out on top. The Krogans simply can't be stopped by conventional means, so a new approach was needed, hence the creation of the Genophage. The Genophage, a biological weapon that reduces the probability. Long story short, the Turians along with the Solarians dropped the Genophage, which effectively made the Krogans a dying race. A decision not born from hate, but necessity. Again. Fast forward to 2186 and there's a chance to cure the Genophage. Throughout the years and this video, the Krogans have been more or less viewed as a weapon. You could argue they weren't fully at fault for the whole episode, but they share a large portion of blame. And I would disagree. You see, the Krogans are not that different from the other council races, and in particular, humanity. Like the other races, the Krogans were relatively intelligent and at some point had a thriving society. Newly discovered ruins revealed that the Krogans had a particular advanced understanding of structural and geotechnical engineering as compared to the other cultures at a similar stage of development. Old Krogan architecture demonstrates seismic loading techniques that would have both resisted earthquakes and diffused the small-scale vibrations from vehicles in their sprawling cities. However, Tuchanka has very little tectonic activity. Instead, researchers believe that the ancient Krogans were concerned with safe cohabitation with one of their planet's apex predators, Karos, the mother of all thresher maws. Prior to the Genophage, Krogan population growth was limited by predation, disease, and war. Even so, their birth rate exploded once the Krogan achieved industrialization, leading to wars over resources and living space. When the Krogan ran out of land, they settled into an arms race that ended in nuclear devastation. Tuchanka's relatively short golden age was at an end. And for thousands of years at the dawn of the Krogan nuclear war, battles to claim small pockets of territory capable of sustaining life escalated into full-scale global war. Weapons of mass destruction were unleashed, transforming Tuchanka into a radioactive wasteland. Krogans were reduced to primitive warring clans struggling to survive a nuclear winter of their own creation, a state that continued until they were discovered by the Solarians 2,000 years later. And here lies the problem. The Krogans are not that different from the other council races, and in particular, humanity. We have more in common with them than you think. Throughout our existence, the human race had been involved with various conflicts over and over again. 84 years ago, we had a world war which resulted in the deaths of around 50 to 60 million people. 25 years before that, we had roughly around 21 million people dead in World War I. Head on down to the Congo and you had 10 million people die at the hand of King Leopold II. Don't forget Mao's regime, which is estimated to have killed over 40 to 80 million people. 56 million indigenous people dead over 100 years in South, Central and North America due to the European settlers. Africans sold into slavery by their own people and forced into it by another group. And I could go on, but the point I'm trying to make here is, there's nothing particularly unique about our history in comparison to the Krogans. We're both extremely violent and have a lack of care for life. Maybe one race shows more of a proclivity towards violence. But can you begin to imagine what would happen if many of these actors that cause mass atrocities such as Mao or Stalin had access to nuclear weapons? What would happen? A Tachanka nuclear winter would happen. Which is exactly what happened to the Krogans. We could have ended up like the Krogans of the nuclear war, regress back to basic instincts, hunter-gatherers probably. I don't think it's a reach to say that could have happened to us. The thing is, we robbed the Krogans of their chance to actually mature, accept their own wrongs and work together as a race to prevent another casualty like this from happening again. I'm not trying to humanize the Krogans, I'm trying to tell you the simple truths. We have more in common with them than you think. And if we didn't, then this decision wouldn't have been difficult in the first place. So again, the Krogans are innocent. Everything that had happened and led up to this point isn't on them. But I agree with the Genophage, because at this point, the numbers don't lie. Curing the Genophage at this stage would have only resulted in delaying the inevitable. The Krogans were always a threat to the galaxy, and the Fermi paradox basically kept them in check. Now, you could make an argument that the Krogans might have learned by now. They might have become culturally aware. But why put the fate of the galaxy in the hands of another race? I'll pass. The Genophage was the right decision. And that makes me an asshole. But an asshole with a reason. Let me explain.